Welcome to the Classroom Brew podcast. This is the podcast where teachers are going to sit down, have a couple of drinks, and basically, we're going to talk shit about education. So for this episode, we're actually going to do a Skype call for our guest this week, so I'm very excited. You guys are going to meet Vanessa DeWig. Hopefully I pronounced her last name right. So Vanessa teaches in Poland, but she's been all around the world doing ESL education. So we're going to give her a call and chat her up a little bit. So if you haven't already, rate and review whatever app you're listening in. If you would like to be on the show, you can reach us, classroombrew@gmail.com or at classroombrew on social media. So that really helps out. Love having you guys on. Even if you just want to interact with the show, that's great with me too. But until then, I think what we should do is give her a call and then see where this thing goes. And there we go.
Hello.
Hey, Vanessa, how you doing?
Very good. Thank you for having me on, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you reaching out and wanting to be on. That's awesome whenever we have people that want to be on the show.
Yeah, it's a great concept. I like your idea where you can reach out to teachers, especially someone who's, on another continent. So that's always exciting.
And this is a first. I don't think we've had obviously different states and things like that, and we have different listeners around the world, but we've never had someone on the show that's abroad.
Yay, I'm glad to be the first.
So speaking of abroad, so your Instagram handle is abroad in Poland, which is kind of a nice little play on words there. But
thank you for noticing.
But I guess talk a little bit about your background. You mentioned that you were from Chicago and then eventually through different circumstances moved to Poland, but where are you at now in terms of teaching?
So right now I'm in Warsaw, Poland. And I'm teaching at a primary school here. I teach kindergarten to 8th grade.
Okay.
So I teach primarily children right now, but I've also taught adults and everyone. Yeah,
that's quite the range right there. So before you got there, though, so you were all around the world teaching ESL to different people. Where are some of your locations you've been?
I wasn't teaching all around the world. I was teaching through the computer all around the world.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I had access to students from Brazil, from Japan, from Turkey, from France. I don't know, like everywhere. And I did that for about 4 years. But I have mainly classroom experience.
Sure.
Classroom experience. Yeah, and that's what I'm doing now. Teaching online is a different. It's a different game.
Yeah, it sounds like it entirely, especially if they're so not just multicultural, but also different time frames. So they might be one at a different pace than the other. But how'd you get into that? Like, what was the job market to lead you into teaching online for people all around the world?
Well, I mean, I'm a single mother, so I had to find a way to balance taking care of my son and at the same time making money, ideally from home. So if you want to work from home, if you're a teacher and your life doesn't allow you to just go anywhere, well, then you can bring the world to you. They're online teaching.
Right.
So that's what I did for about 4 years. And that was a challenge. There was no video, so I didn't see my students.
Okay.
So I was just talking to people around the world for 4 years, and it was exciting and fun, but I prefer teaching in the classroom.
Sure, absolutely. Well, different types of, I know they've kind of debunked the whole learning styles thing, and it's more so like everyone has each learning style or whatever, but even still being able to use those visuals or movement in the classroom and stuff is still pretty important, but
right, but it's not necessary, and also it taught me to use my voice, and this as someone who has his own podcast, how essential your voice is as a tool, right?
Right, absolutely.
So
yeah, you got to use that teacher voice, especially when they start to
it's a moneymaker.
Absolutely. So I guess in terms of ESL, whether you're in Poland or you're doing it online, or even if you were in an American classroom, what are some of the main challenges that you face when you're trying to teach? I mean, that's a really difficult task. People don't really realize that because, we do it every single day. Right. But what are some of the difficulties you face on a day-to-day basis?
I think for every teacher, it's just finding that connection with your student where you both can trust each other with the task at hand. And, that's the same no matter where you are in the world. It's just, how do I connect with another human being, right? And then get that human being to trust me to be their teacher or mentor or whatever, to lead them through this classroom, or to educate them. And I think all teachers have to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there like a general trend that you've noticed that's like different between building the trust when you're, working online with somebody versus when you're in the classroom with somebody? Like the difference of like the human connection for actually being there?
Oh yeah, it is. Of course, face to face always is going to win. Like, you can read off of someone's body language, and it just feels more natural. With online teaching, especially not using a video, you have to be very calm and understanding that the other person is probably not comfortable doing this. And I always fall back on humor or just making a calm atmosphere for my students. Yeah. So that's what we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you said, regardless of where you're at, it's all about building that trust. And I think my thing, it took my kids a while, last year especially, where they didn't realize that some of my humor is very deadpan. And it took them a while to they were kind of off put by it, but now they kind of pick up on the subtleties of it. And that definitely helps. But
how old are your students?
So I teach high school, for the most part, sophomores.
Okay.
So grades 10.
Oh, they're a tough bunch. They're always, a bit more serious. They look at you like you're just an absolute idiot. You don't know what you're doing. It's actually harder to win over teenagers than any other group.
It's a fun group. I know that's usually the group that everyone's like, oh God, you teach sophomores? I don't teach freshmen, so I guess that's a nice luxury, but I actually do. I love my sophomores, so that's fun. So you talked about American Day. Teaching in multicultural classrooms, but what is American Day when you're not teaching in the States?
I know. Okay, so I've been living in Poland now for about 10 years, and I used to live in a smaller city called Radom, and Radom doesn't have many foreigners, especially Americans. So I was like their token American whenever they needed something. They call Vanessa. And I do some work for a cultural center. They're called American Corner. Okay. And there are American Corners around the world, actually. And they're sponsored through the American Embassy. And it's to promote American culture, history, English, things like this. So they would ask me from time to time to go to a local school for their so-called American Day, whereas the school was just, talking about American history and culture. And so I would go there as the representative of our country.
No pressure.
No pressure. And, and it's very nice. I feel very honored to do that, and I try to do the best I can to represent American culture. And I would just give talks to them, and they would ask me questions about our country. And it's very cute that they're so engaged with it.
More than some American students are, I'm sure, even still. I guess have you noticed any like major differences then? So like you have students that they are very interested in what it's like in American culture and things like that. Have you noticed, like, if you could pick, like, a handful of different takeaways, like, what's the big difference between teaching in the United States versus teaching abroad, whether it's online or in person abroad?
Well, I'll talk specifically about the Polish markets because that's different. When I was teaching online, by the way, I was teaching to business students. So they're professionals. It's a bit different. Right. Teaching to Polish students in the schools here, and even not just children, but adults as well. It's different because here they focus more on, I think, a more formal atmosphere. They will refer to the teacher in a more like they say pan or pani, which is like a really formal Mr. or Mrs. Okay. It's you have to really guide them through creative tasks. Where I feel like in America we're just kind of conditioned to think outside the box. Here, they're still very much so in the box, and you have to allow them the time to get used to that, just to be up there in front of the class and just do something. It's very uncomfortable for them. They don't like to make mistakes, which is really hard as a teacher, because if my students don't make mistakes, then I can't teach them because they're not. You have to learn from your mistakes, right?
Right. They're afraid to fail forward, as we call it.
Yeah. So I've even had to write it on the board. Make mistakes today, and you should see the appalled looks on their faces. No. But those are some of the major differences. You have to like get through the layers of this culture, and then once you do, it's great. You just have to win them over.
Sure. Now, once you do like win them over and you break through those layers and anything like that, have you ever had like an instance? And again, this could be online or like brick and mortar school. Any moments where you've had like some sort of a behavior incident and you're like, oh shit, now what?
Yeah, all the time. Online, of course not. Online it's, again, adults, and I think maybe sometimes you might have, let's say, a flirty student as a female teacher. Yeah, it's a little gross, but that happens.
Right.
But teaching children, I mean, they're very naughty. They're very, you have to be very strict. And I'm not someone who likes to be strict, but if you're too soft, they will just run all over you. So you have to come in with like a more authoritative presence. And that's not my comfort zone. I prefer to just be more relaxed.
Right.
Right. Yeah, teaching Polish students especially, you have to show them that you're in charge, not them. And I in fact, I learned that in Chicago when I was teaching adults in Chicago up on Belmont. I taught a multicultural classroom, but mainly Polish adults. And they were really loud and crazy in the classroom.
Sure. Sounds like
I'm
my
not
kids.
Kidding. Yeah, see? But these were adults. These were like parents. These were, mothers and fathers. They had jobs. They were, and they came into the classroom and their feet were up on the desk. They were sleeping in the class. They were.
Oh, God.
I know. So I had to be very strict even then.
Yeah, it baffles me sometimes. Like, what did you think we were coming to this room to do today? Like, I know. Like,
yeah,
I know. Yeah. Like most of the time, it's just like they don't know that it's doing like any harm or it's like causing anything. But at a certain point, especially if you're talking adults here, like, come on, like you have to have some self-awareness, right?
I know. I had one student. An adult. He came to class. This was in Chicago. He came to class drunk, and I was. I was pregnant at the time, so maybe my hormones were a little more like on guard. But I told this guy, it was a man, I told him off and I kicked him out of my classroom right before a test. And yeah, I was just like, I can't believe I have to do that. Like, why would you come drunk to class?
Oh, yeah. We get kids all the time if they come in and they smell like, it's very loud in there, if you see where I'm going with this. But I just, it's something that you don't realize that you have to deal with because for some reason they don't seem to catch it at like the front entrance or something like that. And it baffles my mind that it's like, how is this acceptable that I have to also worry about whether or not a kid's high and then causing a distraction as a result of it? Yeah, it baffles me. It truly does.
Yeah.
But especially at the adult level, that's crazy.
It's unacceptable. It's not anything that we're taught as teachers when we want to prepare for this job. We don't have, a chapter in a book like how to take care of drunk and high students.
I guess we'll have to write that chapter, I guess.
Yeah, why don't you write our own book?
So I guess as you work to kind of balance the load of teaching, whether it was online or in a physical school, what are some of the difficulties that you faced like personally? Because I know, so like I even just like last night, I was texting with a buddy of mine that I teach with, and this was our first day back from the strike and stuff like that, and it's already the toll of stress and worrying about other people's kids. It already sunk in. So I guess,
Yeah.
what are some of the day-to-day things that you personally are kind of fighting through and trying to work through?
Well, okay. So for me personally, because I'm a single mother, I'm raising a 10-year-old boy here in Poland in a culture that's not my own.
Hmm.
And I have to deal with still learning about this culture, still trying to figure out the language issues. I have a lot of stress because I work a lot. I work 35 hours in the classroom. That's not including preparation and everything else I do outside of the classroom.
Right.
So it's like some days I just come home and I'm just, my brain is just going crazy and I'm shaking sometimes because of the amount of energy I had to spend in that one day to cater to so many different people. And Poland is, I like Poland a lot. But as an American, sometimes I feel a bit isolated. Sometimes you just want to go to a coffee shop and you just want to see a friendly face,
Right.
and you just want someone to smile.
A human
Or,
interaction.
yeah, and that's just not how they typically are in public. At least I have a lot of great Polish friends, very warm, sweet people, but just day-to-day interactions, that's not typical.
Sure.
So it just plays on your psyche at
Yeah,
times.
yeah. That sounds like it'd be downright depressing at various points.
It is, I know.
Like especially in the winter time, but
Yeah, yeah. Actually, right now I'm looking out the window and it's gray and just kind of cold.
oh,
Yeah, so you have to find ways as a ESL teacher living in another country, you have to find ways to deal with that new environment so that you can try to beat the cultural depression away.
yeah,
And yeah,
absolutely. And it's crazy you mentioned that about the weather too. So we're in the first week of November right now, and we've already had 2 days of snow.
I know. I saw that. I'm like, oh, I'm glad I'm not back in Chicago.
Right. Now, I guess long term, going along with that, do you see yourself, whether it's because of something not related to teaching, or maybe it's like some other poll or something like that? Do you ever see yourself wanting to move back to the U.S.?
Well, I actually did about 5 years ago.
Okay.
I moved back with my son for 1 year, and I lived for 1 year with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And that 1 year showed me why I can't move back.
Oh, okay.
Because I've changed so much. So then I chose to go back to Poland. Because when you take that big leap and you go live in another country, and I've talked to a lot of people about this and I've read about it, they will tell you this, that there's something that changes within you, and you don't feel entirely American anymore, and you don't feel entirely wherever that country you are. You're just like a perpetual outsider. So for me, it's okay being an outsider in a foreign country, but to feel like an outsider in my own country felt really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why I miss Chicago and I love it and I love America. It's just that just to stay there long term, it's just not possible right now for me.
Mm-hmm. I wonder though if, like, let's say, and I'm not trying to like sway you to move back to Chicago or anything or make your life choices, but I wonder if that would almost be an asset. So like I teach mostly Black and Latino students. And so for the most part, whenever we have these discussions, because I do a lot of like restorative justice lessons because I teach social studies, and we always come back to this whole idea of, like, even with the strike, when we came back, we had for every class, we had about a 15-minute discussion, which is the entire period, talking about, is our district, once they get this funding from the New Deal, are they actually going to be equitable and fair to the Black kids on the South Side or the people that aren't in those selective enrollment schools? And it got to the point in almost every class where they were making this connection. And it's not like I was not trying to guide them into this, but almost every single class period said something to the effect of, we're kind of the outsider in our own country. So I almost wonder if that can be something that, whether you're talking about police brutality or you're talking about education funding or whatever it may be, that you might be able to relate to students if you were on, well, even anywhere in the US, not even just Chicago, where
Hmm.
people of color are not treated as if they are an insider. They're more so treated like an outsider.
Wow, I never thought of that. Um, that's a good point. I mean, I can sympathize with their situation of being an outsider. Of course, their situation is much worse than mine. Mine is more like it's called well, they have this isolation in their own country because of this deep-rooted racism
Right.
and ignorance, whereas I have this outsider feeling just because I'm literally an outsider. Like I'm not from here.
Some xenophobia in this
Yeah,
case.
yeah. To some extent, there is some xenophobia, and for the most part, I have to say something positive about Poland, that they really do like Americans. I mean, they
Oh,
have
that's good.
America Day in their
I
schools.
mean, yeah,
So,
that's true. It's a good sign.
so right. Compared to other European countries, I think Poland is more pro-America.
Mhm.
And as a white woman living here, that's been in my favor. My African American friends, on the other hand, living here, sometimes they don't always experience positive things.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it follows them, right? But just being an outsider in general, yeah, I can totally relate to that. I've always been the black sheep. So, but black sheeps, we have our own herd.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, you got to find your in group, which is always important.
yeah.
Which is probably the most diverse in group too, when you think about it, considering how many people are the black sheep.
I know.
I guess when we're talking about your downtime from teaching, what are some things, since you talked about like how it's a lot different if you go to a coffee shop, there isn't the same type of connection. What are some things that you do to kind of, and this is something that I'm still searching for the answer for. I almost started off where podcasting was my hobby, but now it's just part of my routine that it's like, oh shit, I got to find another hobby. But what are some things that you do to try to take your mind away from the stresses of, even though for me, like even if I go to the gym, I'm thinking about different students and what I can do to help them and stuff. But what are some things that kind of take you outside of your teacher mind?
Well, okay, so I really love music, for example, and so I like to collect records and listen to my records.
Okay. Like old school vinyl?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I like punk music, I like rock, I like country music, whatever. And so I just get lost in music. You might see me on a Saturday night at a punk concert in Warsaw.
Right.
It's just funny to think and then in the morning I'm reading to kindergartners.
Right,
But that'll be like my typical week. I also like to draw. I'm an artist.
Okay.
I like to write. I like to do creative things, and I do work, like I said, with American Corner. So now I'm preparing a presentation that I'll give in 2 weeks at a conference in Rodham, where I will talk about the American can-do spirit.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'm doing some research about that and learning about what it means to be an American. Like I have to really define it. And why are we so positive? Why are we so upbeat? They want to know this.
Sure.
So I focus on that, and I find that really grounds me. I have great friends. I have wonderful friends, actually. A nice community here of people who really help each other. So I just focus on that. I'm never bored, by the way. Like,
That's good. That sounds great.
Never. Like, you can't be bored.
Right. I'm kind of worried that I'm going to wind up getting into like the bored category because like I just finished up the football season, so I've got a little bit of downtime between my next sport, which is going to be weightlifting, and then I'll go straight from weightlifting to coaching track. So I'm not going to have those like 13, 14-hour days anymore. So I'm like, what am I going to do with 8 extra hours of my day? It's going to be an interesting.
God, I would love that problem.
No, right? It's going to be weird. I'm sure I'll find something to do, but the positivity of American culture, that's interesting though. So
we're like uber positive compared to other I've learned this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
teaching.
I know my students are definitely over positive when they talk about their SoundCloud rapping career or how they're all going to definitely be in the NBA one day. They're definitely very positive when it comes to that. Be like, oh,
They
so
need it.
you're going to be drafted in the NBA? How is basketball practice going? Like, oh, I don't practice. I'm not on the team. Like, oh, okay. Great.
See,
You going to college for that? They're like, no, I
that's
don't need to.
that's definitely the downside to positivity.
Yeah.
That's the
Some false positivity, I guess. They kind of
right.
don't see the connections that they should be making. But
Mm-hmm.
so we kind of
Right.
joked about we should write a chapter on how to deal with certain things in the classroom. But you are
Right.
literally right now in the midst of publishing your own children's book. So what's
Yeah.
that's awesome. I only know like a handful of people, and most of them I don't know personally, but they've like even gone to the lengths to write a book. But what's the book? What's the process? What's that like? That's got to be incredible.
Well, it just started as something simple. A few years ago, I was just looking at a book with my son, and we were just making some jokes together and having fun. And I thought, oh, I should write a book about the conversation we just had. And so I just wrote it out one day, and then a good friend of mine, she's an artist here. Her name's Kimba Kerner. I'll plug her. she's she's also an American,
Mhm.
and she's a wonderful artist. And I asked her if she would like to collaborate with me on this, and she said yes. And I'm not going to give any more information because it hasn't. I want to wait.
Okay.
But we have an organization that is going to help us, and we're now starting to do the artwork and to get into it a little more. So I'm hoping by next year that I'll have my book published, and
Oh,
I'll
wow.
dedicate it to my son because he was my inspiration for that.
Yeah. That's gonna be so cool because like think when he is older and he looks back, he's gonna see this actual published children's book,
Yeah.
alongside like
I-
Shel Silverstein and all these people, and it's dedicated to him. That's just
I don't
awesome.
know if I'm. Well, you know what? I hope that my boy will one day look at me and think, "Wow, what a cool mom."
Oh, definitely. I
So,
mean, he's like, man, when he listens to this podcast in like 30, 40 years, he'll be
yeah.
like, she went to punk rock concerts? That's awesome.
He knows that about me though, and he just looks. Every child looks at their parent like, "Oh God," I'm sure even like Ozzy Osbourne's kids looked at him like, "Dad, you're so embarrassing."
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm assuming that there's way less drugs in your system, so you can
Oh,
form
God,
coherent sentences unlike Ozzy Osbourne.
for sure.
Which is, by the way, one of my favorite, like the seventh inning stretch at Wrigley Field when Ozzy Osbourne did it, and it's just like, like that's,
got it.
oh God, it was awful. It's just that,
He'll make you want to go get drugs.
yeah, there you go, exactly. Like, oh God, end this game sooner. But no, I'm sure
Yeah.
he'll look back and he'll, maybe he'll even check out this episode and be like, wow, my mom was
Yeah.
such a cool broad in Poland.
I was.
But awesome.
That's it.
Well,
Mhm.
thank you so much. I mean, this, like, truly, Vanessa, this was awesome. It was great to connect with somebody that's
Yeah.
not in the U.S., someone that's outside of the echo chamber. It was a lot of
Right.
fun. We'll have to
It
do
is.
like some sort of an update whenever the book comes out. We can plug that. I don't
That would
know.
be great.
I don't know how much pull my audience has, but maybe something will help out. But people should definitely check it out whenever the time comes. But
Yeah, that would be great. And it would be nice if more of my ESL friends got into the conversation, because I feel like as ESL teachers, we're kind of pushed to the side, like, oh yeah, you're an ESL teacher, whatever. But we can bring a lot to the discussion. We have a lot of interesting stories and crazy situations.
yeah, absolutely.
Teaching around the world.
Anytime it's multicultural, especially, that has to be something that should be heard.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
So
cool.
thank you for doing this and for talking to so many different teachers and giving us a platform to share our stories. It's great.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Anytime we can all kind of either co-commiserate or whatever you want to call it, that's going to be helpful to kind of, if we don't have a beer and laugh about it, we're just going to cry about it. So we got to do something to kind of curb that.
Exactly. I like that. That's good.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Vanessa. I appreciate it. And then we'll stay in contact. And then, I'll of course let you know when this episode is going to come out.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so as you can see, that was an awesome conversation with Vanessa. For everybody else, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you haven't already, rate and review whatever app you're listening in. If you'd like to be on the show as well, just like Vanessa or Mallory more recently, we can just do a little Skype call to set that up. So classroombrew@gmail.com or at classroombrew on social media. If you know somebody that might be interested in this podcast, or if you're like, maybe they would want to be on the show, tell them about Classroom Brew. That really helps us out. So thanks so much for all the support. We are back from the strikes. This has been a very interesting week already. But until next week, when I'm sure I've got some sort of an update or some guest for you, class dismissed.